Hey everybody, Arthur here, and welcome to the Top 100 Switch Hidden Gems list. This is the first ever series of videos I made on YouTube about 1 year ago. And I had kinda put this on a hiatus for a while, unintentionally so, as I kept trying new stuff on the channel, and then the 3DS and Wii U eShop's closing news came to be, and I once again shifted my attention away from this series. But I've been itching to get back to it, and have been working on it in the background while everything else was going on. So I'm happy to bring it back, and I've got 11 more hidden gems, or underappreciated games this time, to share with you guys. So let's get to them. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the channel. This is From the Void. Starting with Retro Blast Xeno Crisis. Xeno Crisis. This is another modern take on the arcade classic Smash TV, much like Galaxy Champions TV featured previously on this list. It brings the same addictive twin-stick shooter gameplay, dividing the stages into small rooms that you need to clear of all enemies to progress to the next one, topped by a formidable boss encounter in the end. Between each level you can use the currency you collected to exchange for better stats like health and firepower. In Xeno Crisis you can run out of ammo for your regular gun, and every time that's about to happen, an ammo pack drops randomly in the stage, which will force you to move around while still dodging enemies and occasionally hitting them with a melee attack, and this introduces another layer to the gameplay dynamic. It's clever game design, really. During the stages you can find temporary powerful weapons as well as health packs, and you will need all the help you can get, because this is a tough game to compensate for not being too long. Xeno Crisis is really awesome, especially in co-op where the two players can revive each other, and a testament of how great gameplay is timeless. The soundtrack here also deserves a mention. Yeah, what more needs to be said? This is a fine addition to your Switch library if you like a good challenge. Moving on to a very obscure gem of a game called Lair of the Clockwork God. This is a really different one. Lair of the Clockwork God fuses together rather reluctantly side-scroller platforming with classic-style adventuring. You know, the point-and-click type. It does that in a fourth-wall breaking, or scratch that, fourth-wall obliterating way with a really well-written and humorous story and character interactions. Seriously, this game is hilarious. This is in the same series of point-and-click adventure games, Been There, Done That, and Time Gentlemen Please, which by the way are also great games worth a look, but those were only released for PCs. This time around, Dan is done with the point-and-click brainy thing, and has decided to embrace the modern trends of indie platformer darlings. While the other character, Ben, is completely opposed to the idea and is sticking to the traditional adventuring, so he refuses to jump off a ledge, run, or collect floaty things. This friendly clash between the characters is handled in a fantastic way, not only through the brilliant writing, but also in the gameplay. By pressing L, you'll switch between the two characters, and will use their widely different abilities to open the way to each other to progress. While Dan does all the predictable platforming and acrobatics, Ben will be meticulously interacting with the environment, analyzing things, gathering usable items, combining them, or crafting them, as Dan insists is the trendier term, and finding brainy solutions to progress. At points, the characters will be in completely different environments, and in other situations they will have have to act in conjunction, with Dan being able to carry his adventurer friend on his back. The constant change of pace here is excellent and keeps the game fresh for the entire duration, but be advised that this is heavier on the classic style adventuring than on the platforming, so this is more for a fan of point and click games, but a phenomenal take on the genre that I highly recommend for anyone not completely opposed to this kind of game. Give it a go. Lair of the Clockwork God is a true hidden gem. Now turn the volume up for Everhood. Many will call Everhood a rhythm game, I bet, but it's not really. It's actually the opposite of a rhythm game, as you have to avoid the notes that come in rather than hitting them at the correct time. So having a good sense of rhythm will not help, you just need to have good reflexes. But whatever you may call it, this is a fantastic battle system, unique, creative, and incredibly engaging. To avoid the incoming attacks, you can jump over them or move between the 5 lanes. Later, you can also absorb the nodes and send an attack back. Needless to say, it becomes a crazy hectic trial to survive these battles and exhilarating to do so. Everhood takes heavy inspiration on Undertale, even though it's not an RPG, you don't have equipment or levels or anything like that, but the darker environments, the weird creatures, the dialogues, the meta-narrative, the sound effects, and even the letter font for the text boxes are very similar to Undertale. But the gameplay itself is very different. Everhood is all about the awesome battles that are made much more enjoyable because of the excellent soundtrack. In between battles, you'll be just exploring this very odd world and witnessing a rather interesting story, that's it. But it does all those things very well. So this is for sure a phenomenal hidden gem. Everhood is fantastic. Shifting to splendid platformer Splasher. The fact that this game is still somewhat of an obscure platformer is an absolute travesty, because Splasher is a brilliantly well-designed game, in the level layouts, in the controls, and in the gameplay mechanics. This is a very fast-paced game, reminiscent of Super Meat Boy, additionally because in Splasher there is also a strong need to interact with walls, but for different reasons here. Depending on what type of paint is coloring the wall, you may bounce or stick to them, defying gravity in many ways, but without ever losing your momentum or the overall fast-paced flow of the game. And on top of that, you'll soon unlock the water hose, with which you can wash away the colored ink from the surfaces as well as kill the infected monsters. Throughout the levels, you'll find fellow Incorp employees trapped in cages or glued to surfaces, and you can opt to save them all, with some of them being trapped inside warp zones, which function like bonus stages from Donkey Kong Country. And the final trapped employee can only be freed if you find enough yellow currency by killing enemies and cleaning surfaces. The entire game plays like a dream. There is a real fluidity, no pun intended, that keeps you going and going indefinitely. There is also a strong incentive to do speed runs, which goes really well with the gameplay and is a blast for anyone interested in this kind of thing. Splasher is a top quality 2D platformer, a must-have for fans of the genre. It stands tall even against the strong competition of this kind of game on the Switch. Following up with classic RPG love letter, Rise of the Third Power. This game takes heavy inspiration in many Golden Age RPGs, most notably Chrono Trigger, and it does it really well. The entire pixel art style is very similar. It has no random encounters, just like Chrono Trigger, as you can avoid the battles by not touching the enemies, which is great. And furthermore, the overworld is almost exactly like Chronos, with a very zoomed out camera and again, no random encounters to speak of. It balances the features derived from old games with a lot of personality of its own, especially in the battle system and story, both providing high levels of satisfaction to the player. You control a group involved with the resistance, desperately trying to prevent a second Great War, and let me tell you, I fell in love with several characters in this cast, and with the story itself due to how well written the entire game is. Another aspect that sets this game apart are the battles themselves. First, in the graphical department, with fantastic looking special effects accompanying the skills and spells of each character, but most importantly, the battle system is very straightforward while still involving a lot of strategy. Each combat feels meaningful as the difficulty is considerably high, and the game offsets that by allowing and encouraging you to use your special skills often, because your MP or energy replenishes during the battle once you meet specific conditions. You also have access to team combos, much like Chrono Trigger, and there is a real well-made balance between all the characters' skills and how they synergize with each other, and it also helps that at any time during battles you can switch in characters from outside the battle to change your tactics and turn the tides in your favor. This is an excellent traditional turn-based RPG, so if you're looking for a modern take on those, do give Rise of the Third Power a try. You're not regretting it. This next one, I gotta say, I cannot understand how a great game like this stayed in the shadows as much as it did. We are talking about The Legend of Tianding. Legend of Tianding is exquisite. First of all, in the graphics department, it's immediately striking. Then it has a compelling story and setting, as it takes place in 1909 Taiwan, which is absolutely unusual for a game, and is based on a real story of Liao Tianding, who was pretty much Taiwan's Robin Hood, but proficient in Kung Fu instead of archery. But for sure, the best aspect of the game is its action. Liao can use his Kung Fu moves both for combat as well as for platforming and exploration, and they refine the gameplay really well, so this is great. Tianding can also use his red sash to wrap weakened enemies and steal their weapon. I usually don't like when you can take enemies' weapons in games, because that's often not a well implemented feature, but in this one, it's a really cool aspect. He is masterful with every single melee weapon, changing his style of combat significantly, and he can even steal pistols, rifles, grenades, and rocket launchers. It's awesome. You can even steal the boss's weapons. The Legend of Tianding is a tough game, especially in boss fights, while the stages are rather long and full of secrets to find. I feel like no one discovered this game yet, which is a real shame, so I'm really happy to feature it here. Check it out if you like unique side-scroller action adventure games. Moving on to severely underrated Kunai. This is a typical side-scroller Metroidvania through and through, lots of exploration in a huge interconnected map, secrets to find, lots of action and platforming. The platforming here gets a highlight for sure, as the titular kunai are not weapons used by the main character, but rather a double set of grappling hooks. You control the right and left kunai with the respective shoulder buttons, and this actually feels really good. It creates a interesting spin on the exploration and platforming aspects. You can even grapple with both kunai simultaneously and fling yourself upward. The main character, a tablet-faced robot aptly named Tabby, slowly becomes a fully equipped ninja. He has a katana for regular melee attacks, electric shurikens for stunning enemies from a distance, and many more. The story is nothing new or creative, where humanity is in the brink of annihilation as the robots have turned against them. But a resistance group is trying to grip to the last glimmer of hope, and you are the chosen one to do the dirty work. Another highlight is the carefully chosen color palette that does a great job at conveying the bleakness of the game's world while still looking pleasant. Kunai is an absolutely solid Metroidvania with a cool twist provided by the grappling hooks, and I can't see a fan of the genre disliking this. Give it a go if you're into those. Following up with Boomerang X, this game truly deserves way more recognition than it got. It's a completely unique first-person shooter from Devolver Digital, and despite being a very one-note kind of game, with no story, only one NPC the entire game, and no incentive to explore, Boomerang X has a fantastic action gameplay, unlike anything else, and overcompensates all those other aspects. You basically use the boomerang not only as a weapon, but as a teleportation device as well. Anytime you throw the boomerang, you can teleport to it, and you will keep the momentum that the boomerang had at that time. So you will be propelled forward, backwards, or sideways in the air. It's pretty awesome. On top of that, you can also slow down time, but opposite of the teleportation mechanism, this one only works when you're holding the boomerang. The resulting gameplay of these two features put together is one of the most awesome things I've ever experienced in a first-person shooter. No exaggeration. Basically because there is no cooldown to use those powers. You are supposed to abuse them, and the game is crafted around that, with the arenas and enemies having patterns that will make it challenging, even though the boomerang is beyond powerful. All that, plus a few special abilities you can unlock, make for a challenging and unusual control scheme to learn, but one that makes playing this game feel simply awesome. This is a fine game. Boomerang X, check it out. Next is an artful title in every single way, Chicory, A Colorful Tale. This is a deceitful game. By just looking at it, and even when playing it initially, most people will be skeptical of the game's premise of filling in this blank canvas world with color. The controls it offers to do so feel obtuse, you have a very limited palette of colors to use, and the player will probably question how interesting can even the non-painting gameplay be in Chicory. But through an impressively steady pace in which it evolves, Chicory really has the means to involve and win you over. Believe me, everything here is handled with refinement. It implements gameplay mechanics one by one that will be used both for the light puzzle platforming exploration sections as well as for coloring the world. The story starts off quirky and simple, but evolves so very much, touching on existential themes, and it does it all in a very natural way. You can dump hours into this game without feeling it, and before you realize, you already can't wait to get back to it. Soon the act of exploring, progressing, and even coloring the world world, if you choose to do so, will feel much easier, faster, and more enjoyable. Overall, Chicory is a surprisingly relatable and natural world to experience, and if you open yourself to it, there is a lovely time to be had here. I can recommend this for anyone too, because the gameplay and story beats have universal appeal. The Switch version of Chicory is probably the best one, as it allows you to use the touch functionality, which can be a great option especially for the painting sections. Seriously, this is an amazing game, much more than it seems at first glance. Do give Chicory a chance. Do you dislike Contra games? If so, move on to the next entry. This is Blazing Chrome. Well, this is gonna be the easiest entry to explain. It's about 95% the same as old school Contra titles. In graphics, gameplay, atmosphere, story, pretty much everything. So let's concentrate on the differences. The major one is probably that while it maintains the hardcore difficulty of Contra games, it finds a way to make it much less punishing. The stages are insanely challenging and will require several attempts until the player gets the enemy spawns and patterns, and losing all lives will still result in some loss of progress, but there are no continue limits, and each stage has a few checkpoints that will not require you to start from the beginning even when you get a game over. Of course, higher difficulties ramp up the challenges as expected, but on normal, this is a much more approachable game for all audiences. The crushing difficulty is still there because some stages are so hellish that you are guaranteed to get dozens of game overs, but Blazing Chrome feels much more fair than the old school Contra games did. The weapons are also rather different. Your standard gun is the machine gun, with power-ups unlocking access to 3 new weapons, all very useful, but you lose them if you get hit while carrying one. You can also find some robot companions that provide you extra defense, more firepower, or increased speed. Other than that, it's pretty much Contra with only the necessary changes to avoid copyright problems. But an outstandingly well done title of this kind that Konami seems completely unable to do nowadays, so to me this is totally fair game, and I really enjoyed Blazing Chrome. Try it out. Next is Flynn, Son of Crimson. This game boasts gorgeous pixel art graphics and animations and doesn't lag behind in gameplay at all. Platforming is on point, including using the abilities you learn along the way. Combat is the strongest aspect of the game, with loads of challenging enemies, bosses with interesting patterns, 3 different weapons to use, and 3 magical elements to conjure, all feeling great to use with perfectly tight controls. The world building is fascinating, the map is beautiful with varied locations to visit, races to meet, and stories to unfold. Not one of them feeling forced in, and all accompanied by a terrific soundtrack. And the cherry on top is that you get to ride on a guardian deity named Dex, which changes the gameplay considerably and is an awesome change of pace. This is no doubt one of the best action platformers on the Switch, and it deserves a brighter spot as such, so do check it out. Flynn, Son of Crimson. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider subscribing and following me on Twitter to always catch my next videos, because I do all sorts of stuff, reviews, previews. I'm doing a full coverage on the 3DS and Wii U eShops closing, and I have a lot of new stuff planned to come out soon. So stay tuned for all that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.